Okay, what's up guys and girls? Welcome back to the channel. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go over HP tuners. So this is just going to be a very broad, basic overview of HP tuners, the system, how it works, just to kind of help somebody if you're on the fence about getting it or not, see if it's right for you, show you some of the things that are in it without actually having to buy it, and you can decide for yourself. So if you're new to the channel, this is one of the projects. This is a 2004 Nissan 350Z with a 5.3 from Silverado in it. Pretty much just a budget DIY swap, built everything on it and slapped the engine in there. Do have HP tuners set up on two computers here. You don't need to do it on two different computers, but HP tuners is a three-part system. You have your interface, your cable here. You have two options, an MVPI. Well, you actually have a couple different options now. I should mention that the MVPI 2 just came out, so you can't really buy the MVPI 1 Pro or standard units anymore from HP tuners. At this time in history, you can still find them used. People are still selling them as they're upgrading, but the MVPI 2 is out now, but I'm going to be talking mostly about the MVPI 1 Pro version because that's what I have. The difference between the MVPI and the MVPI Pro is, one, you have this little connector box on the outside here, and this has different inputs in it, so you can hook up like a wideband, for example. And the Pro version also has the ability to record, so you don't have to scan with a computer. So that's two cool differences with the MVPI Pro, but that does not mean that you can't like log a wideband without the MVPI Pro. There's a way to do it, like you can tap into your EGR circuit or an air conditioning circuit and still get the signal and still run a wideband without it, but it's just a little more dinking around, but it's possible. So one other thing to add before we get started, I know I mentioned that there's two different versions, the MVPI 1 and the MVPI 2, but the software is still pretty much the same. They do make some updates and some changes to the software, but they're not drastic. There's some little things here and there that are different, but I'm going to be going through the VCM Suite 4.0 software that I just downloaded off the website today onto this computer. So we'll talk about that. And as I go through it, I'll mention some of the differences that I've noticed so far from like the 3.6 software that I was using before. The other two parts that we have are the editor and we have the scanner. So now let's go to the screen capture and we can start to talk about the editor first. Okay, so let's start out by looking at the HP Tuners website. See what they offer, see what they have, and maybe you'll get a little bit better understanding of what you can actually do with it. So this is under the product section. So there's a picture of the MVPI 2. There's the big difference. It's like a wireless version, basically. So some people don't know this, but HP Tuners also has a Track Addict app and a race render feature. So the Track Addict app is a free download. You can download that on your phone or whatever. I've used it a couple times. It's pretty cool. It'll track quarter-mile times. It'll track G-forces and do a whole bunch of different stuff, and it's kind of cool and fun to use, and you can actually record and you can collect data and put it over a video. And it's kind of what this race render will do also, is you get the video and you can overlay all your data using this race render software, and it'll be a video of your run with all of your relevant data or whatever you choose to put on it. So that's pretty cool. If you want to use something like that. You can find videos of people using this on YouTube, but I would say Sloppy Mechanics has some of the better videos because he has a lot of good data, good information on there, and you really get a good understanding of what the vehicle's doing versus just driving around showing G-forces in the track. So you can actually see some important stuff that would help you in your tuning. And they got just a series of different hardware components and services. They can do some modification to computers and some third-party options. You have, like wideband sensors, but they also have tuning courses. So tuning courses and a lot of stuff done by the tuning school. So the tuning school also has a YouTube channel with a lot of pretty good stuff on there that's very good for somebody that's just starting out. I know when I first started, I spent a lot of time just watching tuning school videos, and kind of helps you just cover the basics. So merchandise is just going to be like hats and shirts and shit, but vehicles, this is important. People ask a lot, like, what vehicles can I actually tune with this thing? So they just recently came out with the Dodge program, and there's a whole bunch of vehicles in this list that you can actually tune. So kind of cool. So you can go into here and like say Hummer, you can see all the vehicles that you can tune with the MVPI 1 and the MVPI 2. So there's some in here that you can only tune with the MVPI 2 that are identified by the 2. I think there's some in the Audi. So in Audi, you can only tune Audi vehicles with the MVPI 2 system. So another thing that you'll see here is this credit system. So HP Tuners does use a credit system. Usually when you buy it, you get 8 credits, and it's typically 2 credits to unlock a vehicle. So when you unlock it, and another question that's asked a lot is, do you have to use credits every single time that you make a change? No, you don't. So this vehicle, for example, a lot of the Chevys and stuff, 2 credits to unlock the computer unlimited. So you can make unlimited changes for those 2 credits. The credits are typically $50 each. But you can also unlock unlimited. So you can unlock unlimited for that year. You can unlock unlimited for that vehicle type. There's a lot of different options that you can do, but it's a little bit more expensive to do the unlimited, of course, but it'll give you a lot more options, like if you wanted to start tuning for other people or whatever. So here's also a list of what all the credit requirements are for the vehicles. So just to clarify, because the way I said it might have been kind of confusing. So if you wanted to unlock like GM computers, for example, 2 credits will unlock 1 VIN number, but you can make unlimited changes to that 1 VIN number for 2 credits. Now, if you wanted to unlock, that's where some of the other unlimited features come in. Like if you wanted to unlock unlimited VIN numbers for 2002 Silverado trucks, that would be higher credit amount, like 6 credits, 12 credits, but you would have unlimited VIN numbers like for a specific year. So there's a couple different ways you could do it. Like you could unlock unlimited GM trucks, you could unlock unlimited GM cars, and you'd pay like 30 credits or something crazy, but then you could basically tune anything. Just wanted to clarify what I meant by unlimited when I said that. So they do have a download page. Like this is where I downloaded the newest version today, and some of the drivers for the old system, new system drivers. So you also have an account on here, so you can upload like your serial number for your unit and your product key, because when you get the system, it'll come with a product key that you have to register. So you can actually log on here, create an account, and it'll save it on there with all your vehicles and everything. They do also have what's called a tune repository on the website, so you need to be logged in to use this feature now. But this is basically a log of a bunch of different tunes. So if you lost a factory file, you could go in, type in your year, make, model, engine, whatever you wanted, and you could find a tune file that you needed. So another reason people may use this is for doing segment swapping, for like changing transmission, stuff like that, but we can get into that later. So just wanted to show you that this is there. It's just a repository for a bunch of different files. All right, so here is what the face of the editor looks like right as you open it up. So I'm actually outside right now in my daily driver vehicle. It's a 2005 Escalade. So I'm going to put the key in, and then we'll read the file, and I'll show you what that looks like. So you just put the key in, go to the accessory position, and I already had a file open. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this. And now you can see that this little processor board thingy with the arrow on it that says read vehicle lit up. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the vehicle. And this will come up, and just click read. So it's going to do a read entire. There's a couple different options. So this is going to take about 3 to 4 minutes to read this thing. So while you're doing all the reading and the writing, you want to make sure that your headlights are off, your radio's off, your dome lights are off. Make sure you're not messing with the doors or the windows or anything like that. You can mess up the computers if you get a low voltage situation while you're doing the reading or writing. You can brick the computer, and the computer's basically junk. I believe it's a hardware change if you need to fix it, so something physically needs to be changed on the board. So essentially the computer's junk. Vehicle information, 2005 Cadillac Escalade, VIN number, hardware is a P59, and it shows a Gen 3 V8. Alright, so after it's done reading, it's going to give you the option to save the file. So you can see up here I have 2005 Escalade stock tune. So I just saved the stock file, and you can save the file without it being licensed, you just can't make any changes to it. So I have the stock file, but I don't have the rights to modify it. So then right away it's going to give you the licensing options, and you can go to no thanks, and you can view the file, or you can show licensing options. How you would actually license it. So you go to show options, and it says attention, you do not have a license to perform the current action. Select the license you wish to activate. So it'll give you the option to do not license or specific. So if you click on specific, it's showing it's going to cost you 2 credits. And the other 2 are grayed out because I only have 2 credits left on here. Credits available, 2 credits. But if I did have enough credits, it would let me click on unlimited 2005 Escalades for 6 credits, or I could click on unlimited GM Gen 3 LS1 based V8 trucks for 30 credits. So that's what I was explaining before. You could unlock unlimited GM Gen 3 trucks for 30 credits. So if you wanted to do this, you would just click on specific, OK, and then it would license the file, and you can go ahead and start making changes. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to click do not license, OK, and I'm going to keep my credits. All right, so let's go over this editor. You got a whole bunch of buttons up at the top. The very top line always shows you your file name and location, so you can see what file you're on. And I would encourage you to always read, or what I like to do, especially if I'm coming out on a new day, is to read the file. Read the current tune, what's in it, because I've been in situations where I've made changes and it ended up being a different file that was in there. Like maybe you were looking at a different file, you forgot it, and or a tune from a different day, and you forgot you were looking at the other one, and you end up making a change for the wrong reason, and then everything's messed up. You got to start over. So it helps to read it, or at least make sure that you're on the right tune, the one that's actually loaded into the vehicle before you start making changes. So you just have your basic toolbar up at the top, file, edit. In your editor, you have like VIN change wizard, gear and tire change wizard. Those are pretty helpful. Tire change wizard's pretty nice. You can just go in and put in your new tire and gear ratio, and then it automatically changes everything for you. So that's pretty simple. And calibration details and view change history. So you can actually go in and look at what type of system you're on right now. And that'll be helpful if you want to see if you have like a 2-bar system or a 3-bar system in there. It'll show all the stuff in here. Yeah, like there's your operating system number, and it'll show if you made an operating system change. And then again, here are all the different segments underneath this operating system number. So if you wanted to do a transmission segment swap under this operating system number, you could take this segment and swap it in, but your operating system number has to match. Compare files are pretty cool. So we'll go into the stock tune and we'll open a compare file, and let's look at let's compare a 2004 Express tune to an Escalade tune. So let's go in, we'll go engine, airflow, and primary VE. And if you notice, some of these are green. So you got these little purple boxes and you got these little green boxes. So these green boxes are anywhere that the tables are different. This is the VE table for one tune. This is the Escalade tune. And then if we look over at this file here, this is the Express tune. So you can see that they're different. And you can kind of click back and forth and look at different files and see how they're different. And then this is actually showing differences between the tables. So one of the things that you can do if you want to make a change, you can zero out if you want to make the tables the same. Instead of, you could copy and paste this table into this table to make a change, or you can just make this whole thing 0, and now these tables will match. These will be the same. So there's 2 ways to do that. So if you had a file that you wanted to use, you could just go to the compare differences, zero it out, make a change. But you just have to make sure that the file you want to use to make the change to is the one that you opened first. All right, so now let's say we came in and we wanted this section to be matching the other table. We'll make this thing 0. Now, only that portion was changed. So those two tables match. So now we can close this thing, and now you'll see that this thing changed colors. It's not solid green anymore. Now it is a green and a red. So you have your purple, you have your green, which shows differences, meaning that there's differences between the two compare files. And this one shows a difference, but it also shows an unwritten change. So the red means that there's an unwritten or an unsaved change. So you know while you're looking at it that you changed something in this table. So then you have your flashing tools, read and write, your unit conversion and calculator. Calculator is just a calculator. Unit conversion has all of these different calculators in there. So if you want to know like what is 17 pounds, it's 117 kPa. Just keep in mind that this would be over atmospheric pressure, so it would be 217 kPa for 17 pounds. All right, so some of the other buttons down here, you can open a file, you can save your file, you can close the file, and that's what I did before when I wanted to do the writing. So like this button right here, I can't read right now because it has a file open. So I would want to go ahead and I would close the file, and then it would pop up my read vehicle. So if I want to open that file back up, I can go back into my 2005 Cadillac Escalade stock tune, and we'll open that thing up. So now we're back into it. So this again is just calibration details and information. You can view your change history, as I said before. So if you made a change, you can actually go back through and see what types of changes you made, or at least what location you were in making the change. So again, compare file, unit conversion, and writing vehicle. So writing is when you make a change and then you put it into the computer. So you do have a favorites button. I don't really use the favorites button very much, but you can do it. It's definitely an option. So if I wanted to go into something and add it to my favorites, so say VE table might be a favorite option. So once that's open, there's a little add to favorites button. So you can add it to favorites. And then your primary VE table is going to show up in your favorites. So you got favorites, you have operating system. So this is going to show the current operating system, and it's going to show what options you have with this operating system. So this is going to be different for each computer too, a little bit. So you have your speed density enhanced, like if you wanted to delete your math, you have a speed density tune. You have a speed density 2-bar tune if you wanted to go no math and boost up to 15 pounds. And you have a speed density 3-bar tune if you wanted to go up to 30 pounds and no math. So like I said, the operating systems are going to be a little bit different if we open up a different file here. So let's look at this 2003. I think this is a Tahoe tune. This is just another factory file. So if we compare the operating system, you see we have different options now. So we have the speed density enhanced RTT for real-time tuning. We have 2-bar real-time tuning, 3-bar, and 1-bar math enhanced real-time tuning. So you have some different options. So just keep that in mind. But the real-time tuning is exactly what it says. There's a real-time tuning feature in the scanner, and you can make changes to certain features in real time while you're driving. So you don't have to stop, pull over, and write. You can actually make live changes while you're driving. Or while you're driving and your buddy's making changes, I should say. So let's go into the engine tab. So engine tab is going to have a whole bunch of engine features. And there's a lot of stuff here. And this is could be easy to get overwhelmed looking at all this stuff. But I'll say right now, after using this for about a year, there's a lot of stuff in here that you're probably not really going to need to get too familiar with if you're just trying to make basic changes, or maybe you're changing a cam or putting a turbo on, just doing some basic stuff. So let's just go through one by one. I'm not going to cover everything, but you have your basic stuff here. Like this is a 5.3 engine. It shows your firing order, number of cylinders, and then you can enable and disable different things like your EGR. If you don't have an EGR, you can disable your EGR. Different shift light settings, tach output, shows your 12-volt pull-up circuit, So idle, you can go in and change different idle parameters, idle airflow parameters. You can change different things like with your air conditioning on, air conditioning off, because the load is changing on the engine. You can modify that type of stuff. A base idle set point. So this is basically showing engine coolant temp versus in gear AC on and off and park neutral AC on and off. So you have 4 different options here, but you can set your target idle speed. And that's what it says right here, target idle speed. It doesn't mean it's going to be there, but that's what you're targeting. And then there's just a bunch of other idle airflow parameters here. So one that you'll probably be messing with quite a bit, especially if you change a cam, is some of the startup airflow and the base running idle airflow. So this is basically a control of airflow at idle. So this is going to be modifying your idle air control valve and changing the amount of airflow that you have while you're idle. One thing to add, like especially for a cam, you can go up here and you can change the unit of measure by this little box. So you can change it to whatever unit of measure you want. And I usually use this grams per second. You have some different fan settings, throttle follower, throttle cracker. Some of this stuff is going to be for like a drive-by-wire setup versus a drive-by-cable. So anytime you would see like electronic throttle control, you're not really going to be using that if you have cable setup. Airflow. So there's a couple tabs under the airflow tab. You have different settings for your calibration, intake air temperature sensor calibration. You can do that calibration. This is going to be basically how your MAF sensor is working and how you would adjust your MAF sensor. So this is showing all of the settings in pounds per hour. So this is showing like 2,600 pounds per hour at 10,000 hertz. So this is 2,600 pounds of air per hour, your airflow, at 10,000 hertz for your MAF sensor. So one other big one is your MAP sensor characteristics. So if you were to change like from a 2-bar to a 3-bar setup, you can change, you have to change your MAP sensor settings. So if you change your MAP sensor, you want to go add boost, make sure that you change your MAP sensor settings or stuff will not read right. And you just have some other airflow settings, VE correction factor, steady state, and dynamic airflow. So some of these things like this steady state, I was helping someone with this the other day. We were using the steady state to try to force it to run off the VE table because the computer was bad. We determined that the PCM was actually bad. So, but we were trying to force it to run off the VE table using steady state. So there's a couple for a basic video. So maybe we won't talk about that in this one. Electronic throttle. So a lot of the stuff, if you're drive-by cable, you're not really going to use any of this stuff. And a lot of setups are drive-by cable. And then you can change your cranking VE. So if you want to have more fuel while you're cranking, and cylinder charge, temperature, complex model, enable, disable. This is basically a bias between, you're enabling and disabling a bias between intake air temp and engine coolant temp. So, and it shows you a little description down here at the bottom of everything. So if you just want to hover over something, it'll show you a description of what everything is down here. So main VE table, this is probably going to be one of the tables that you're going to spend most of your time in. Volumetric efficiency. So in very short terms, it's essentially how efficiently is your engine using the air that's coming into it. So a lot of people call this the fuel table because you're essentially adjusting fueling when you're doing this, but basically when you're adjusting this, you're telling the engine that there's more air coming into it, so it needs to add more fuel. So if you increase these numbers, you're telling it more air is coming in, so the engine's going to add more fuel. So this is where you're going to spend a lot of your time. While we're in here, I guess we can go over some of the basics of how to use these little windows. So you have different options up here. 3D chart, you can see a table, you can see a split. So once I hit the split button, it'll show you your VE table with a little chart. And then if you hover over this, it'll show a little red circle wherever your cursor is. So this would be good for like pinpointing different sections. So if I click and drag this thing up, you can see the number went up to 97. But if I get a little spike, I can click on just that one area and bring it right back down. And that's good for hand smoothing. So if you want to take out some ripples, you can do it by hand. if you right click on here, you can spin this thing around and look at different sections of it. All right, so let's get this thing out of the way. So if we wanted to, all right, let's go through and talk about some of these things on here. So we talked about the add to favorites button. There is an undo button, which is very nice. So if you accidentally put like 500 in there, you see this really big spike, but I made a mistake, so now I can undo it and it'll go right back to where it was. So that's pretty cool. You have a copy and paste feature, which is nice for using histograms from the scanner, and you can copy numbers, you can paste numbers, and you also have options to paste special. So you could grab a histogram, and I'll go over that when we get into the scanner, but you can grab a setting off a pre-made histogram and you can paste special. So you can paste by percent, multiply by percent, multiply by percent half. You can paste special and add. You can paste special and subtract. There's a few different options in there for whatever you feel like you need to do when you get there. You have some smoothing buttons. Smoothing the one with the little 4 corners will smooth the whole section. So if you want to grab this section here, it'll smooth everything in this section together. So if you want to use these other two, you can smooth between horizontal bounds or you can smooth between vertical bounds. So let's create an example over here. So if I want to, let's grab some of these little things and we'll make a little spike right here. So if I want to smooth this out, I can highlight that section and let's smooth it. You can see how it's smoothing the table out. So one thing to remember though, and I got caught on this kind of going back and forth with this thing, is if you do have some spikes and you want to smooth it, or you just made some adjustments, like just pasted in some adjustments, and you want to go up, like this square here when I'm cruising is, a couple percent too high. So say this was like, I went to like 70, and then this one I went up to 75, just in that area. If I go over this whole thing and I smooth it, it's just going to kind of like bring those things back down. So it might take away some of your changes. So that's where it might be good to hand smooth some of this stuff. But that's just a basic overview of smoothing. You can also interpolate an entire section. You can interpolate between horizontal bounds and vertical bounds. So basically what interpolating is doing is it's going to give equivalent spacing from one section to another section. So if I go and I put 100 in this number, or in this box, and I put 10 in this box, I guess I didn't really need to change that, but if I highlight this section, I can interpolate between vertical bounds, and now what it's going to do is it's going to make equal spacing in between all these numbers from top to bottom. So if I rotate this, we should be able to see what this looks like on the table. So that's exactly what that looks like. So if I undo that, now if I interpolate that, it's just going to go straight line from one to the other one. So we'll undo that again. So now look what happens if I smooth it. If I smooth it between vertical bounds, see how it just kind of slowly starts to smooth the selections together slowly. So that would be the big difference between the interpolating and the smoothing. It's essentially kind of doing the same thing. It's just there's a curve here and there's a curve here instead of just going straight. So I'm not going to save any of these changes because it's just a stock file and I wouldn't be able to anyways because I don't have the license for it. But just showing you what some of these things do. So you can also add, multiply, and subtract up here. So if I wanted to take this box 90 right here and I wanted to add 10, I could go put 10 in that box, add 10, and it adds 10. So if I undo, well, actually, let's leave it at 100, and I'll show what multiply does. Now, if I want to multiply, all right, so if we take this number and we're looking at 100. Now, say we want to pull 10% out of the table. So how do we pull 10% out? So if I want to pull 10% out of this number, I can multiply by 0.90, and then it's going to pull 10% out. So that's how you would use that. Or if you wanted to do a whole section over here, say I want to make this whole section. I want to make this whole section 100. Just highlight it and click equals, and it makes this whole section whatever you put in there. So sometimes you can also just highlight a section and then type in your number. See how I put in the number here, and then if you click on it again, it'll put it in there. So there's a couple different ways to do it, but that one seems like it doesn't work all the time when I do it. Another thing, let's undo a bunch of this stuff. All right, so we're basically all the way undone now. So one other thing that I have noticed, just while I was playing around, if I want to take this number, I can hit the little positive and negative buttons on the keyboard next to the backspace button. There's a plus sign and a minus sign, and you can hit those numbers and actually go up and down one by one without using anything on this keyboard. So I just found that one day. So next to the backspace button, there's a positive. If I hit that one, I can just add numbers one by one. So this is actually kind of cool, like if you're doing real-time tuning, and you can just click on the box and then hit number 1, 2, up, down, adjust it without actually having to try to find the numbers or putz around. You can just hit 2 keys. So that one's kind of cool. So fueling, this is one of the things that I noticed that was different from the 3.6 to the 4.0 software. There's a lot more tabs up here. So like your temperature control and your lean fueling, these used to be on one tab, like cat over temp and lean cruise, I think it was. And O2 sensors and open loop, those used to be on one tab. So there's just a couple different things that are different about this section. And flex fuel now has its own tab here. So where the flex fuel, got general, just some flex. Stoichiometry, this is one that you might actually be concerned about. So this is showing your percent. This is going to be your alcohol percentage and your air fuel ratio at that alcohol percentage. So your stoichiometry is basically where your fuel is burning the most efficiently. So like a 14.7 is for gasoline. So your 14.62, there you go. You really wouldn't have to change too much unless you were trying to trick the computer into or something like that. So this would probably just stay the same in most cases. Injector control, this is another place you're going to spend quite a bit of time in trying to figure this stuff out. If you're running like decapped injectors, a lot of times you can just change your injector flow rate versus KPA. So this is showing that these injectors, factory tune, are 33 pounds of fuel per hour. So if you're putting bigger injectors in, you would change your injector flow rate based on the size of the injectors, and you should get injector data that comes with it. Decapped injectors, you can change the flow rate, and you don't really have to change any of the other offsets or anything like that, which is kind of the cool thing about using decapped injectors. But there's also a range limit down at the bottom. You can see down here, if I click on flow rate versus, or just hover over flow rate versus KPA, and I don't accidentally hover over anything else, you can see there's a limit, 254 pounds of fuel per hour. So some computers may limit the, I forget what the numbers are, where they limit them at, but I think like the E38s or the E40 computers, they limit the fuel at like 60 something pounds or something like that. So you got to do some other things to trick the computer into being able to run the bigger injectors. But you have a couple different other settings. You have a multiplier for voltage. You have minimum pulse width, default pulse width, offset versus voltage. So you have an offset table. So if your ignition voltage is low, it's going to pulse your injectors differently to compensate for the low voltage. And this is manifold vacuum versus ignition voltage. So it's saying at this manifold pressure, at this ignition voltage, this is how it's going to modify or offset your injector pulse. All this stuff is going to come, if you buy injectors, all this stuff is going to come with your injectors, or should come with it if it's coming. You're going to change. So this is one of the tabs that was actually split off of another one. It used to be open and closed loop. All this stuff used to be together. So you have your big one is going to be your closed loop enable. This is when you're going to be going into closed loop. So when you're going to start using the oxygen sensors. So you have 131 degrees. That's when you're going to go into closed loop and start using the oxygen sensors. So what this is saying is, if your intake air temp is 68 degrees, like a 68 degrees outside, and that's what your intake temp is, when your coolant temp gets up to 131, that's when you're going to go into closed loop and start using your O2 sensors. So now you have some long-term fuel trim settings, rich lean voltage versus airflow, and this is basically just your rich lean voltage. So when the O2 sensor is switching over from reading rich to lean. So at 451 millivolts, that's deciding what rich and lean is on the O2 sensor. And yeah, so you have different adders for your cold starts. Initial adder versus engine coolant temp. So it's just adding more fuel. This is a multiplier. This is a multiplier to your EQ ratio, and I'll get to that in a different table. But it's showing right here. When it's cold, 30 degrees out, it's adding more fuel. And then you can change the delay and how long it lasts and all that junk. So short-term fuel trim, open loop, enable, disable. So this is going to be your short-term fuel trimming, enable, disable, and your open loop EQ ratio. So this is your equivalence ratio. Your equivalence ratio is based on your stoic value. So the number we were looking at before, that was the 14.67 or whatever it was for stoic value. This is your EQ ratio. This is going to be a multiplier of your stoic value. So anytime it's at 1, this is not adding any fuel to your stoic value. So your targeted air-fuel ratio is going to be that 14.68. So as we start to get colder in the engine coolant temp versus manifold pressure, it's going to start to add fuel. So it's going to run a little bit rich here. It's at 1.1. So this is going to be your equivalence ratio, which is a multiplier of your stoic value. So you're at 1.1, so you're going to be targeting about an extra 10% more fuel just because it's colder. If that makes sense. One of the very easy, quick things that you can change on a factory tune to try to get a little bit more power. So your power enrichment is going to be something that you can change or enable, and you can change your EQ ratio based on these settings. So you can set manifold pressure, come off, your throttle position, hot and cold, when it goes onto the hot table, and your delay. So right now this is saying 3% throttle position, 5,000 RPM for 2 seconds, and you're over 55 kPa, your power enrichment EQ ratio is going to start to take effect. So that goes back to your equivalence ratio and your stoic value. This is basically a multiplier of your stoic value to add more fuel. So this is going to add approximately 20-30% more fuel at this RPM range. So it's an easy way to change it. Let's see if we can find a different one. Let's look at the Escalade tune. So you're at 90% throttle position, 5,500 RPM for 0 seconds. Some actually have a different delay in there, and some are commanding 100%. So in order for you to get more fuel, you have to be at 90% throttle position for 5,500 RPMs. So it's effectively disabled. is what it is in most of the tunes. Like you're never really going to get there. So you can change this and set it at like 30% throttle position, 70 kPa, and 4,000 RPM, boom, and then you turn it on right away. So it's almost like as soon as you get to that throttle position, you're good. For flex fuel, if it's not a factory enabled flex fuel tune, you can't just enable it and turn it on. It doesn't work. You can do a segment swap with a factory enabled operating system that matches your operating system number, and segment swap for fuel, or segment swap for flex. The tune has to be factory enabled, otherwise it still doesn't work. So you can't just enable it and turn it on. So that kind of sucks. All right, so going through the spark tables, there's a few things in here that you're really going to look at. Your high and low octane spark tables, your idle spark advance in drive in park. So you basically have 4 spark tables. So you have a high and a low octane. There's your high octane. There's your low octane. They look pretty close, but they're different. And then you have your idle spark advance, and you can see there's multiple things in the same area that are going to be affecting your timing. So a lot of times what I'll do is what a lot of other guys do is just copy and paste these tables to be the same. But what you would want to watch out for is the RPM at the top is different. So if you compare your in drive to your high octane, you have 400, 600, 800, but then it goes to 1,000, then 1,200. So here you don't have 1,000 and you start at 0. So you just want to make sure you copy and paste all the columns in. Yeah, that way it'll help your timing to not be jumping around so much trying to make adjustments. But that's where you spend a lot of time too. Your VE table, your spark table, that's where you'll be a lot. And you also have these modifiers to your spark table. So you have these tables, and then you have modifiers to your spark tables. So something to consider if you know you're supposed to be at 21 degrees of timing right here, but you're actually at 8, you may be running into a high coolant temp issue, or you might be running into a high intake temp issue that's pulling a bunch of timing. So just something to think about, and that's why a lot of times people are zeroing out these tables. I was having high intake air temp issues, so I left these tables in use. Are spark corrections based on RPM. So if you're 300 RPM over your target idle speed, it's going to pull 35 degrees of timing. So it's adjusting timing based on idle speed to try to maintain the idle speed. And then you have some startup timing tables. You also have a table. So this is going to be your minimum allowable spark. It'll cap it at -20. So if something is pulling a bunch of timing, it's going to stop at -20. How fast it's recovering after it pulls timing for knock, and you can change the sensitivity for your knock sensors. So burst knock is another one that's going to pull. It's going to pull timing. So burst knock is like pulling timing in anticipation of knock from airflow. So a lot of times, like on my tune, I just have this at 8 so I want it disabled so it's not pulling, because it's like pulling timing all the time. So different ways to play with basically the factory tune is trying to keep everything safe. So it's pulling timing, and it's controlling how your torque is handled so it doesn't damage anything. It doesn't hurt the transmission. So you have spark retard for torque reduction. You have a bunch of different things that are going to be limiting torque and pulling timing for torque. So you don't hurt anything. Okay, so in your engine diagnostics tab, this is going to be more around your check engine codes and check engine lights, when the codes are going to come on, how they're going to come on, and what codes you have enabled. So DTCs, your diagnostic trouble codes, you have all of your trouble codes that you have available, and then you have the options to enable the check engine light, the SES light, service engine soon enable light, or you can turn the code off or change how it's reporting. So you can have it come on malfunction indicator lamp on first error, on second error, or you can have no error reported where it's not going to be reporting any error. So you have different misfire settings and modification you can make, and airflow. One big one, especially for doing speed density, is making sure that this MAF fail frequency is set to 0. So that's one that you would use for speed density. But yeah, you can just change how your check engine lights come on. So transmission, you can change a bunch of stuff in your transmission. And transmission general, this tab does not work. So you can't just go down here and switch to a 4L80E or you can do a manual or whatever, but this is not going to change anything. If you had a 60E and you want to switch to an 80E, you can't just change to an 80E on here. You have to find a tune with the same operating system, and you have to segment swap in the 80E. So you'd have to find one with same operating system that's running an 80E transmission, and you have to segment swap it in there. You can change how your transmission is shifting. You can change the full throttle, part throttle, full throttle RPM. You can do normal, performance, hot. So you can change your shift speeds. So you can change at what speed your transmission is going to shift at for each gear. You can change what RPM your transmission is going to shift at. So you kind of want to match these up and make sure they're pretty close. You can change all that stuff. You can change how the fluids and the pressures are working inside the transmission. You can change your shift timing, how long it's taking to actually shift the gears. Torque converter settings, so you can change your torque converter duty cycle. You can change when it's applying and releasing. So when you're cruising, this is saying in fourth gear at 50% throttle, it's not going to apply the torque converter until 255 miles per hour. So essentially it's just turning it off there. But that's how you would change your torque converter, so you can change all that stuff. And again, you have transmission torque abuse settings, so you can be safe or you can go fast and break it. So system, this is where you're gonna be able to change your VATs. So security, this is where you're gonna change your VATs. So you can either be at serial, PWM, or none. So if you don't want the VATs on, you can put none, and then you can go into your right, and then right vehicle. I can't do it on this one. But say if I go to so if I go to serial, I go to none, I can write, and then it gives me the option to write calibration, or I can write VIN, tuner lock, or VATs, and then just click that, click write, and then it'll go on and it'll change your VATs, and it takes about 15 seconds to do that. So you can change your fan settings, you can change your air conditioning settings, enable, disable, when you want your fans to come on, all kinds of goodies. Speedo, here's where you can change your speed limit, speed limiter. That's just a fuel cut, basically. You can change your speedometer calibration, so how many pulses per mile, pulses per revolution. This is one of the numbers that gets changed when you do your. This is one of the numbers that gets changed when you do your gear ratio and tire size change. It'll change all this stuff for you to automatically keep your speedometer calibrated. So, going through all that. Again, like I just did the VAT, so if we wanted to make any change to the computer, so if I want to make a VE table change and I want to go up 10% on here, I go up here to write the change. Got to have the vehicle off, key turn forward, right vehicle, make sure this is on right calibration, Then you can click there and write the change. And it'll go through. It'll take about a minute, 2 minutes, and then you're done. Okay, so here's an overview of the VCM scanner. So you can see I have a log file pulled up, and it shows quite a few different elements in this setting, and you can set this up however you want. So on one of my other scanners, I actually have the gauge, the chart versus time, and the graphs, the histograms, all on separate tabs. So this entire section is each one of them individually. So this is a log of one of my drag passes that I did. It was an 11.4 pass, and you can see that I'm logging RPM, my speed, my injector duty cycle, manifold pressure, spark, knock retard, throttle position, and all kinds of different stuff. You can really put in kind of whatever you want to see. I'm logging intake air temperature, because that was one of the important things that I wanted to see, because I was having issues with high intake air temps. But you can also add pretty much anything that the computer is seeing, you can watch on here. So you can see if your torque converter is applied. You can look at desired idle airflow, idle air control. You can see a whole bunch of stuff. So if I close this file, it'll allow me to add different channels. So if I want to add a channel and I want to look at my transmission input speed, I can look at my transmission input shaft speed. So you can really look at anything you want. So if you want to look at transmission input shaft RPM, you double click it, you add it to the channels list. It'll show up as this green highlighted color, and now that's on your channels list. So now when you want to add something to your chart, you right click, go to charts layout, and you can go down here and say I want to put it in group 5. I can add a series, or no, there, it showed up on group 1. So if I add a series, I can go to my input shaft speed, transmission input shaft speed RPM, and boom, now I have transmission input shaft speed on there. New series, I didn't change the name, but I can change the name. Trans. So make sure it's on the channels list, and then you can add it to your graphs, you can add it to your chart, you can log whatever you want. So you can even play back your files if you want to go back in and open up an old file. I'll just pick a random one here. It'll show the whole scan, and I can sit here and play the log file back, and it'll actually show me everything that was happening while it was running. So I can just sit and watch what was happening during the pass, and you can sit and analyze it and make sure everything's okay, or see what changes you want to make. Go back into the editor, make the changes, and then go out, make another pass, and scan it again and see what's going on. So this histogram section up here, I didn't really think I was going to use this very much, but I ended up using it a lot, because you can kind of customize and create different tables for whatever you want. And these are the things you can copy and paste into your other tables in the editor. So if I have this spark retard table, just for example, I can highlight this, and we'll go up to 5600 RPM. I can right click, copy this, and I go back into my spark table. So if you have your histogram created, then that's when you can right click and paste special, and then you can subtract. So if I was looking at timing and I was showing knock retard, I can subtract all the locations that it had knock retard, and then it would pull it out of my main timing tables. So some other stuff you can do with the scanner. You can read your trouble codes, diagnostics and info. This is where you can look at your engine trouble codes, check engine lights. Also look at vehicle controls and special functions. So in here you can enable and disable fuel injectors. You can lock your timing. You can force closed loop and open loop. You reset your long-term fuel trim. So if you wanted to start start fresh. You can reset your fuel trims, all kinds of stuff you can do in there. Zoom in and out on the scan. It's basically just a very cool tool for monitoring, and you can set it up how you want. I do have some other videos, and I can go into some more detail in another video on how to set some of this stuff up, but that's just a basic overview of what it does. Very cool tool, and I know I wouldn't be able to live without it because I like scanning. I really like looking at stuff. So alright, so that's it for this one, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I know I went through some of the stuff kind of fast, didn't really explain a whole lot, but that was the idea, to just try to do a quick overview of it. And I know I got a little sidetracked on some of the tables, but we're just going to have to get used to that and deal with it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.